James says, count it all joy. And James gives a reason for the joy. I want you to go with me, watch in the text, go back to the text. James chapter 1, go back to the text. Verse number 3, he says, because you know. I want you to see what James is saying here. James says, count it all joy because you know something. Woo! Count it all joy because you know some things. Listen, James says, count it all joy whenever you face trials of many kinds because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Watch this. James says, count it all joy because you know something. This perspective on tribulation, on trials, on discouragement, and on disappointment, this perspective requires maturity. I want you to get this because this message is not for the faint of heart. This is not for the immature Christian who wants everything to work out all the time, who wants to be able to click their heels 3 times and say, I'm blessed and highly favored, and every blessing I need is going to fall in my lap, and I'll never go through hardship, I'll never go through pain, I'll never go through tests and trials. This is for the mature Christian who knows some things. This is for the one who's been through something and has come out on the other side of it better. Woo! Who has come out on the other side of it not bitter, who came out on the other side of it better. The joy is because you know some things. So then the obvious question is, well, what do you know? I'm so glad you asked. RPC, you're a good class. I want you to follow me. I want you to follow the reasoning. The question is, what do we know? Write this down. Number 1, what we know is that trials or tests stimulate your faith. Trials or tests stimulate your faith. I want you to get this very clearly. The test activates, but also reveals your faith. We don't know what our faith is made of without a test. It's all pretty songs and platitudes until you're tested. It's all a bunch of churchy catchphrases until you're tested. I want you to get this because you don't know what your faith is made of until you go through some things. The test reveals where our faith lies. We believe in our own physical strength until we don't have it anymore. We believe in our doctor until he or she can't deal with the problem. We believe in our money until our money is gone. You don't even know you have faith until you're tested. I'm not a doctor. I'm a pastor. Dr. Newman, I'm a pastor. This is what I've done for 22 years. But what I do remember, what little bit I remember about anatomy and physiology, is that every person, unless there's some sort of birth defect, every person is born with the same number of muscles. Am I right? The same number of muscles. And so the difference between those of you that are Ripley with your muscles and those of us on the fluffier side, the difference is not how many muscles you have. The difference is in how you've learned to exercise them. And so Scripture says God has given to every man a portion of faith. The difference in the amount of faith you have is not how much you've been given, but how you've learned to exercise it. And so understand, for your muscles to build, there is something called resistance training. So that means for you to build the biceps, something has to pull down against you while you're lifting up against it. For you to your chest muscles, it means there is a pressure pushing down on you while you resist it and push against it. The challenge is most of us want muscles without resistance. And most of us want faith without trials. But I need you to get this thing in your heart. Understand that you don't even know what your faith is made of without a test. What you know, number one, the reason that you have joy in tribulation is because you know that the test I'm dealing with is there to stimulate my faith. All of us exercise faith. When you came into this building, you sat down on a chair and you had faith that it was going to hold you up. You didn't look at it, you didn't test it, you didn't put something down on top of it, you didn't run it through some sort of examination. You knew that when I see a chair, it's meant to support me, and you sat down on it in faith. Some of you in a chair that you may have never sat in before. You didn't need a relationship with it. You didn't need to be there when it was purchased. You just knew that that's what chairs do. But that's what faith is supposed to do. When faith is activated, you're supposed to just trust that that's what God does. I don't need to know how he'll do it. I don't need to know when he'll do it. I don't need to know who he's going to use to do it. Faith says that's what God does. He said he's a provider. That's what God does. He said he's a protector. That's what God does. He said he'll survive. He'll save me from myself. That's what God does. He said he'd be a friend that sticks closer than any brother. That's just what God does. You have learned then the necessity, the practicality of testing and allowing your faith to be tested, because you don't know what kind of faith you have until you go through the tribulation.